Yesterday we did a playtest for a game for our game night that is still in beta. And it wasn't what I'd call a perfect playtest in the sense of one, I had some perf issues that stopped me from being able to evaluate the game in any meaningful way until I lowered the settings, and then I still had some issues. That happens. That's not a quality issue. It just happens, right? I just may have some weird configuration or something that causes that. And then the other thing was we had a lot of people, some who had played the game before, some who hadn't. There was a lot of talking back and forth. And that kind of breaks the first impression kind of experience of it. And in particular, if you watch the video, you can hear me at one point kind of frustrated with some people who are just telling other people how to play. That's the worst thing you can do in a playtest, because that's just ruining those people's time. The valuable feedback we could have gotten from those people is gone because they're just like, oh, I'm doing this, right? And there's a lot of confusion, and they know where they're at in the development. They know that they don't have the explanation of what's going down. And so that's fine, but equally you learn a lot, and you learn a lot of the frustration of like, I feel like I'm always doing this. I'm kind of upset about that. So that said, overall, the playtest was good to get some of that out of the way and dive into it. But so the game itself is you capture points. It's an FPS, though it has third person, though I had no idea it had third person in it. But it's also about movement and kind of goofy movement. And that is not a surprise when you realize that it comes from the person who made Double Action Boogaloo, which has a lot of that crazy diving and all kinds of stuff, and it brings that into here. And I think that is what comes down to the biggest question I have for the game. And I brought it up yesterday, but I just kind of wanted to talk about it here, is you have a game that in one sense is very serious. They know they have to change the art, and it's very military and very, and it's communists versus Americans or something like that, or freedom, like very arch. But yet the world looks very realistic. The guns are very realistic. The characters are very realistic. And then you have kind of goofy motion. And those kind of fight each other, right? And then not only do those fight each other, but the game itself fights it. In Double Action Boogaloo, if you try to do a crazy jump and you get killed, you laugh because you're going to hit a button and you're going to restart. You're going to jump right back in. You're right by all the action. There's not a lot of running. Here, you may have been running for 3 minutes, and then now you're like dead, and you're like, well, that jump I did was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. And it makes you play more conservatively. So there's that balance, right? And that's always super, super hard to pull off. And so I'm kind of interested to see, as they start making some of the changes that reflect where they want the game to go, if that pushes against then the core play of the game, or if that can work together with it. Because that is a big concern I have. It was a big concern I had with the trailer that I'd given them some feedback on as well. And then past that, there's always just the what's discoverable when you start, or should be discoverable, versus what do you need to tell players. And you can always give me an example of the game that you had to go on the webpage to understand it, and that's the exception. And there's a good, the road's littered with a million others that didn't explain it, and no one ever got into it because it didn't grab them. And so there's always that back and forth when you're making a game of how much do you really need to explain at the start, and how much do you fill in. And when you're part of our playtest, especially our playtest or any playtest, if you've played the game, try to let other people play the game. Don't explain. So there's a phrase that if you've worked with me, it is just stuck in your head. And that is, don't explain, be curious. Don't dismiss, be curious. And it's always about, if somebody's bringing up something, don't dismiss it as like, oh yeah, just do this. Be like, well, no, hang on. Why are you thinking that? Why do you think this is the order of operations, or this is the behavior that I should be doing, or what's going on there? Because you want to pull that out and you want to understand that, because in this world, you very rarely get the opportunity to get inside somebody's head for a brief minute. And so when you do, you should treat that with like the utmost respect, as well as the biggest opportunity, and not spoil it. And so the playtest, like I said, I wish there was a little less chatter from people who had played a lot, and people who played a lot who dismissed it. And there was some stuff where, like there's a line of capture, and then you could go back and capture the person's start of that and ruin kind of this whole line. When we're actually making TF2, I brought this up last night, we're making TF2 well, which does capture points in a row. I was actually a spy back then all the time. I was a spy tester, and I would go and I would capture the first point, and I would ruin it for the team, and they'd have to come back and defend that point, and it just wasn't fun. It just was a great strategy by me that resulted in everybody else having a bad time. And so you have to weigh that as well. So that said, I might play something else, a single player game somebody had given us this weekend. Or they given us last week and kind of play that and talk about that design. Because to me, it's really interesting of like how janky but yet understanding you can go when you're testing and playing stuff. So again, we have somebody else in our Discord now talking about sharing their game for us to play test. More than welcome and happy to people to submit your games, or just ask me. It's not submitting. There's no process. Or just come hang out and get to play the games and talk about them and give feedback. And it's super helpful and super valuable for developers. And we were all napping up in the bed today. She was napping under the covers and I got up. Say hi. Okay. Well, there you go. All right, I'll let her wrap.